Welcome to Soul Loom, a space where the threads of lived experience, energy, and insight are woven together through real human stories, because our human experiences are not interruptions to life, they are the loom itself. Today, my guest is Lisa Herbert. Lisa is a Queensland journalist, author, cemetery guide, and consumer advocate who has spent 13 years on a mission to make conversations about death and dying less awkward. Her funeral planning guide, the Bottom Drawer book, The After Death Action Plan, is now in its 5th edition, helping Australians explore what they want their farewell to look like and feel like, and making things easier for the people they leave behind. Welcome to Soul Loom, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So before you were an author, you were a teenager who picked up a book by psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and something stayed with you. Tell me about who Kubler-Ross was. What makes a teenager even pick up a book like that and read it, and what it left with you?
Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the first psychiatrist, the first person in the medical profession to give the emotional needs of the dying any time. Before that, if you were dying, it just wasn't spoken about. You were put in a dark room and virtually just left to die. But Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross opened the doors to conversations with the dying, and what she found was absolutely profound. I've got about 10 of her little books. This was one of the first I read. It's got that old 1970s smell, and it just really resonated to me that this hadn't been done before. She was an absolute groundbreaker. So I picked these up. My mother had these books in her bookshelf, and I was bored one holidays and I had an insatiable appetite for books. So I read everything in the house, and then I picked them up and I couldn't put them down again.
Amazing. Okay. And so what was it actually about the content of that book that never left you?
It was the fact that Western society, and even as a child, I knew that Western society didn't talk about death. It was taboo. Children, and I grew up in the 70s. So at that time, children still didn't go to funerals, for example, because they wanted to be protected from the grief. Whereas we know now that that's the worst thing you can possibly do. And that holds a lot of trauma or a lot of people because they didn't farewell their family members because of that misconception. So the fact that Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was having these conversations, and the thing that grabbed me was that these people had so much to say, but they just weren't given a medium to say it. So it was just like, let's give these people a voice. People are important. Their stories are important. And that was the number one thing that sat with me for decades after I read those books.
It's so interesting, isn't it, how some things when we're at that age and I think it's from that age, well, here in Australia where we're leaving primary school and going into high school, that certain books do have that residency. I can remember I read Jonathan Livingston Seagull at about that age. And it was the first time that spiritual language of transitioning and the soul leaving the body just kind of clicked with me and made sense. So it's amazing how books that we read at that age, which was kind of like, why would you even pick that up? So then you're a journalist, and I'm assuming you're doing journalisty things and you're writing articles and working for publications. You decided to write this book that you just felt needed writing. What led you to that point?
It was so innocuous. It was all my elements of decades of weird things that I enjoyed all culminating together. It was a really innocuous comment. I went to a fair at Randwick in Sydney. I was working at Channel 7 at the time, and I went to this fair, and the local funeral directors had an open day, and they had a cardboard casket covered in the Sydney Roosters logo. And I went, that's hilarious. That's so cool. A, this was in like 2011. I didn't know you could get cardboard caskets. And B, that's what I want. I want to be buried in cardboard caskets. So I mentioned it to one of my friends. And then I realized that if I died, Chiquita probably wouldn't find out in time. She was on the perimeter of all my other friend groups. So I thought I probably should write her name and number down. So if and when I die, we can call Chiquita. She knows what I want. And so I wrote her name down, and then I wrote a few more names down. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to write more information about what I want for my funeral. And then I really went into the weeds and I couldn't find the information I needed. Social media wasn't big back then. Funeral directors certainly didn't have very open social media accounts. I couldn't find the information, so I just started literally cold calling funeral directors and mortuaries and asking them, hey, what happens with this? Can I be buried with that? And I'm thinking, I can't be the only one who needs to know this stuff or wants to know this stuff. So after a few months, my head was full of really interesting information. So I just decided, let's put this into a book because I can't be the only one who needs to know this information so that they can make the right and the informed decision that's best for them.
And we don't think about our death process for ourselves. I don't think we think about the death process usually until our mum or dad pass away, and both of mine have passed now. And you have to actually be in the space and arrange it. And I never had those conversations with my parents. And there was nothing in their wills, to my knowledge. Well, I had to rewrite my mother's will on her deathbed because we couldn't find hers. Yeah. Until you're in the situation, I don't think you'll even think about what somebody wants or even what you want. And there are so many options available today. It isn't just the whole burial or cremation. There are other things that we can do now and that we need to do, because the whole sustainability question around burials and space and land, to even have that as a thing moving into the future. So your book is now in its 5th edition, and I'm assuming that the reason why you have to keep putting it out again is because you continually are coming across information that you find needs to now go into this book. So just thinking about the process, what sort of things have you put into the book that people may not even realize they need to know?
The biggest thing, and one of the reasons I keep on updating them, is because the death sector is becoming more and more transparent. And this is the number one thing. And I call myself a consumer advocate because I want to give people the knowledge and the confidence to push back either their family members, the medical profession, or their funeral director and say, no, this is not the way it is. This is what I want. Either you give me what I want or I will go elsewhere. And this is the number one thing I want people in the reading the bottom drawer book, the knowledge. So if the funeral director you have chosen, you decide, as you get into the process, you're getting red flags and things, you can pull out. You can say, look, you're not the right one for me. Is there someone else in your organization that I can deal with? Follow your gut. And the thing about funerals is, and when someone dies, you are just not thinking. It's so hard just to focus on one thing, let alone everything else. Grief is a physiological process that the brain goes through as well as the heart. So all these changes make concentrating and organization and keeping appointments and just keeping lists very difficult. So if you can have that information of mum wanted this, 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 and this, and you go to the funeral director and you go, there you go, this is what she wanted. If the funeral director says, oh, look, we don't use cardboard coffins here, then you go, well, that's what my mum wanted. Can you arrange for a cardboard casket? Thank you. I can give you some links. And they say, no, it's not something we do. Then get up and leave. Just say, thanks very much. You are not the funeral director for me. And that's what I want people to know is you are the funeral director. You are paying these other people to help you. And they do a very, very important job, but you direct the funeral. And if they can't do things your way, find another agency, another business who can. So it's all about you, not about anyone else.
And I suppose it's very similar to planning a wedding, and you wouldn't have anything at your wedding that wasn't exactly as you wanted. So your funeral is actually no different. It's just the other end of the life cycle. And it's like any other consumer product. There's a whole sector out there that can provide you what you need. And if you can't get what you need, then you go to the next one.
There are funeral directors who they're either ignorant or they're fibbers. And I hear terrible stories about funeral directors not accommodating what the person wants by telling fibs or not having the knowledge to fulfill the requirements. So I want to give the consumer the knowledge to say, hang on, this isn't sitting well with me. Let's re-adjourn tomorrow. I'm going to make some calls. And I want to make them comfortable in doing that. They can say thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go for someone else. And that's the biggest thing, is taking ownership of the funeral. And you don't even have to use a funeral director. You don't even have to have a funeral. And that's okay. Whatever is right for you and your family can be done. So that's a really important message.
So within the book, you obviously talk about the actual process from visiting the funeral director and the actual ritual side of what a funeral or whatever you choose to have. I was having an episode the other day with a death doula, and she was talking about how often we don't even realize that there's no rush from the moment the person passes away, whether that's in the hospital system or care system or at home. There is no rush to have to do it. There's quite an open parameter of time. So it's something you can take a deep breath about. Does the book also talk about the external things around that process? So the things we should be asking ourselves that we need to leave information about for other people to follow, even things like where your will is and where your papers are kept and who your utilities are with, so that the person who possibly is executing your estate has a go-to list of all the things that they need to do.
Bit of both of that. My book, the Bottom Drawer book, is about the person, not about their things. I have on my Facebook page, the Bottom Drawer book, one of the pinned posts is a free downloadable guidelines for who is your phone with, who is your insurance with, all that kind of things. So that's a really great place to start. So on Facebook, the Bottom Drawer book, go to the pinned post and download this free guide. I don't need your email, don't want anything. I just want you to get started on your planning. So that's available to you. Whereas the book focuses on everything that the person, the executor, the person left behind needs for, say, the 2 or 3 weeks after you die. For example, where is your will? Who is your power of attorney? Where is that document kept? Also things like for your death certificate, they're going to need your mother's maiden name. Like there's all sorts of things that they need to do this paperwork. And I kind of say, well, if death doesn't kill you, the paperwork will. So that's
definitely
the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that's in here. And another thing we've been talking about, the will, Michelle, is most people do not read a will before the funeral. So a lot of people say, oh, everything's in my will, but it's like the chances are they might not find that will before the funeral, or they may not have a will reading before the funeral. So best to not put your information with your will, just put it in your bottom drawer or have a conversation.
Well, you have what happened with my mum, and as often as I said to her, probably in the last 10 years of her life, can you please call the solicitor and get a copy of the will brought up? Because, we're 2.5 hours away from where his offices were, and she didn't do it. And then we discovered, literally within the weeks of her passing, that he had been disbarred. The will had disappeared. I know, right? And I now had to rush to get a new will written, because what probably a lot of people may not realize is that if you die in what's called intestate, so there's no will, it is another administrative nightmare that you've just added to your journey.
It is a pain in the butt, because the court decides who is going to run your estate, and that can take months. So you've got all this grief happening, and then you've got another hoop. And you know as well as me, Michelle, that there's always blokes who go, I don't care about this stuff, just put me in a box out on council rubbish collection day, and I don't need a will, I've got nothing. But oh my gosh, the angst that creates when the time comes is
it's huge
nightmare.
Yeah. So if people listening, if I am to say anything to you out of this episode, have the conversation with your existing parents, brothers, sisters, whoever you think you may have to be the person for, and do they have a will? Where is it? Get it written. Make sure you have a copy in your bottom drawer with your bottom drawer book, because it's a nightmare once you get there to have to try to navigate all of that.
And there's also, in my eyes, there's a more important document than a will, and it's called an advanced care plan.
Definitely.
So if you are in a position where you can't make medical decisions for yourself, who is going to do that on your behalf? Do you want to be kept alive at all costs? give me all the drugs, hook me up to all the machines, feed me through a tube? Or do you want to say, no, 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 if I can't eat for myself, if I can't, you know, say hi to the grandkids, then I'm out. So that's having a medical decision maker or an advanced care plan, absolutely critical. And I talk about this stuff in the bottom drawer book. It's critical.
And I would definitely agree with that, because that was something that I had to think about at the same time, was the will, the power of attorney, and the enduring or the advanced care plan, or whatever terminology they want to put on it. And if it's not something that you, as the son or the daughter or whoever, thinks they can manage, or you don't want to be the decision maker, find someone who'll do it for you, but you've got to have it. It's the one question that everybody is going to ask you in those final moments of, what do you want us to do? And it's not something you can think about on the run.
And hope, and the guilt and regret. But hopefully you would have had those discussions, or there is a plan in place that you know. So it takes the pressure off you, because you know what your mum wanted. So it's like, okay, mum didn't want to be on life support. She didn't want antibiotics administered. She didn't want artificial respiration, blah, blah, blah. That's what she wanted. I want all those things for her, but she didn't want it. So I'm going to fulfill her wishes, and I have no guilt because that's what she wanted. So that's why that conversation is so important.
And it also makes it so much easier for you to navigate the health system when they're asking you, well, what do you want? Because that is now the letter of the law. They can't try to talk you out of it. They just have to follow the direction that you're giving for via that plan. So it also takes a lot of that navigation of that part of the process out of your hands as well. You just go, nope, that's it. That's the document, and you have to follow it.
And that's a great point, Michelle. Sometimes you may feel pressured from the doctors. They don't like losing. They don't like people dying. So if they can encourage life over death, despite what quality that may look like, some doctors are very reluctant. Others get it. Others know that people die, but there are still doctors who don't say the word dead and dying to their patients.
And I definitely do think that it's something that's changing, especially with the new assistance dying laws that have been brought in, and people who are making that a conversation. And I mentioned this in my other episode, that when James Valentine passed away the other day, he was very vocal about how he wanted his whole end of process to be, and that he'd done the directive to be able to end his own life through voluntary assisted dying. And it was a wonderful conversation to listen to, that someone could be so liberated, his family were informed. So it does definitely make the process joyful rather than sorrowful, I think, if you can think about it and have those conversations now.
Yeah, it literally just takes the load off. And we've got to remember that dying can be a complicated process. It's a natural process, but with the medicalization of death, it becomes quite complicated. So for him to give that gift of ease to his family and those who loved him as well, what a man. Like, he knew what he wanted. He knew he didn't want to be a burden, but also he doesn't want to be suffering. And as he said, when I've had enough, I will have had enough, and it'll be my time. And that's exactly what happened.
It was a beautiful conversation, and I would suggest to anybody that's interested, look it up. Look it up on the Conversations and the ABC websites, because it was a beautiful thing to listen to. So something else that I find interesting, and I often see you pop this up on your socials, is that you're a cemetery guide. So why did you decide to incorporate that aspect of what you do into what you do?
I was one of those things. Right throughout my life, I've really enjoyed wandering through cemeteries and seeing what I can find and looking at interesting names and dates, but I didn't know why. And all this culminated when I started writing the book. And the whole thing about writing down your wishes and your plans. And with this one, there's also room for reflection. The most stupid things you've done. What are you most proud of? Those really intimate thoughts. There's room to write in this, because your story is important, and we're losing those stories. So the amount of emails I get, oh my gosh, thanks so much for the book. We were able to write his eulogy just because of everything he wrote down.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
And this is the thing. We think we're dull and boring. We think we raise 3 kids, we go to work, we come home and we die. But no, there's so much more. There are so many more contributions you made to your family or the community. And so that really deserves to be recorded in some capacity, whether it's just in the pages of a book or whether it's on a website. It's just so, our stories are important and fascinating. And that's what I enjoy about cemeteries. And I call cemeteries libraries because every grave holds a chapter of our history. And I do tours through the Drayton and Toowoomba Cemetery in southern Queensland, which was a pivotal cemetery. It's one of Queensland's oldest public cemeteries. And the stories I'm finding there is absolutely out of this world. Stories that no one else knows until little busy me starts going through births, deaths and marriages, starts trawling through the archives, starts going through the old newspapers from like 1888. So I'm able to build these stories about these people who did fascinating things. Again, ordinary people, but they lived during a fascinating time. And I get to tell those stories to people. And that's really important because I don't want those stories lost. So there are some real parallels with telling your stories. You might not want the whole world to know everything, but at least, you know, your family knows a little bit more about you. And I've had one lady contact me whose mother was very learned. She traveled the world as a professor, giving high level talks to, big rooms. And she was sitting by her bed. Her mum had dementia, and every now and again she would be lucid. So it was one of those lucid hours that they had a conversation about, what are you most proud of? And she was expecting her mum to say, oh, that time I, went to UNICEF and presented. But no, it was when she was a 12-year-old and she passed her piano exam. And this lady didn't even know her mum played piano, but it turns out she was an extraordinary pianist. And so then they had this massive discussion about her piano days, what she studied at school, and they went down a rabbit hole that the daughter didn't even know existed until she asked her mother, what are you most proud of? And that is the best outcome because it was so personal. And now, even though her mum has died, long died, she gets to be able to read her words in this book about how proud she is and how hard she worked on her piano. It's just, what a beautiful story to remember.
And it's something that I often think, and it's always wonderful in hindsight, but even when you're going through your own journey of life, especially once your parents have passed, things come up. You can be at other family gatherings with cousins and brothers and sisters, and then you'll go, I don't know. Did mum and dad do that? Or we didn't ask that. And you go, damn, it's too late now. Like once you've kind of got to the level where you are the generation that's left, if you haven't asked those questions of mum and dad and grandma and grandpa, it's too late. And often those conversations actually allow you to see how your own character has formed and why you do the things you do and why you have this innate interest, such as yourself. You have this interest because of a book your mum had on her bookshelf. Ask as much as you can now and have those conversations because it's too late.
It is. And one of the new things that I put in the latest edition or the last 2 editions is I call it sound effects. Just like your handwriting and scribbles in this book will become a memento of you, so will the sound of your voice. Smartphones have easy-to-use voice recording features, so consider recording some messages, tall tales, part of your life story, disclosures or admissions, jokes, your songs or poems, bedtime stories for the grandkids, ukulele playing attempts. That sound, we all hear a song and go back. Oh, I remember hearing, Crazy for You, Madonna at a grade 12 party at Corinda State High. So those sounds trigger memories. And I hear all the time from people saying, I miss my mother's voice. I wish I'd recorded her voice. So if nothing else, if you've got someone in your life that's getting older, and of course we all die at whatever age, but just record them. Just say, hey, I might be pregnant now, but in 9 months I'm going to have a baby. Maybe in 5 years, that baby would like to hear their grandmother's voice. So, hey, Gran, can you read this bedtime story? And it's just so important, those little things that we can do so easily. Thankfully, I recorded my dad talking about, and my dad's still alive, he's 93 this year, but I recorded him about a decade ago talking about Bradman's last test, which my dad was at. So now I've got his voice aged in his 80s, and I'm about to start recording how he went through the war, but his voice has totally changed in a decade. It's very weak, and his thought process is a lot slower. So I'm able to document the change in the last couple of decades just with his voice. And when he does die and you start forgetting what they sound like, I can just listen to those stories again. So if there's one thing, if you've got someone, if you're going to your nana's today, just pull out your phone. You don't even have to tell them.
Yep.
She might be in the kitchen making a cup of tea, and she makes a cup of tea and she always taps her spoon 3 times against the china teapot or whatever else. Those little nuances can take you back and enrich your grieving experience and your memorialization of that person.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. And then you might suddenly go, that's why I tap my teacup 3 times, because I never realized that that's what grandma does, or that's what mum does, because you just are not present enough in those moments to realize those connections of why you do what you do. It's probably also a really good way to let people talk about those skeletons in the closet. So you could do the recordings, tuck them away. No one has to even hear about them until you've passed over. So you don't have to worry about the guilt and the dread and the judgment, because you're not going to care. But it actually might allow family members to understand why you were the way you were. So that's a brilliant idea.
And wouldn't it be great if you had those conversations before you died?
It would, but I do sometimes think, depending on what that skeleton in your closet is, that, that judgment and that guilt probably stops people doing that. But I think
Yes.
for the person, if you can, and as you say, like today, even people who are probably your parents and grandparents, if you're our generation, they can use a mobile phone. They know how to hit a record button. They can just talk that into their phone, and then it's there and you can find it later. They don't even have to tell you they've done it. They can put in the book that they've done it, and then to go back and write down the passcode of the phone. Don't forget to do that.
Yeah, very important. And there's things like, your mum's Anzac Day recipe. She's made it since, the great grandson came home from war that time. Just, as she's cooking, as she's making those biscuits, just put the phone down and ask her to talk you through the process. And she'll go, oh, yes, and this is how you do the sugar. This is how I do it. They say do it this, but I always use an extra cup, blah, blah, blah. So again, you've got this beautiful story of her in the kitchen doing something that she loves, and you'll have that forever, and you can pass that down.
Yeah, I love that. And I think so many people listening will hear this and go, that's such a great idea. Why haven't I ever thought about that? And it just is something now that you're aware of, that you will have thought process of doing, rather than then going when it's too late, damn, I wish I had. So yeah, brilliant. So for people who are listening, if they haven't started kind of putting themselves into that brain space, and this is probably one of those episodes that people will go back and listen to again and start taking notes, what would you say are the important first steps to do when they're in this process?
First step is to know that it doesn't have to be done today. It doesn't all have to be done today. You need to make a start today, but you don't, like, if you get the book, you don't have to fill the book in at the same time. It's baby steps. And the first baby step could be, think about how you want to be farewelled, whether you want a cremation, or A1, do you even want a funeral? And you may have to discuss that with your family, because the kids might want to give you a funeral, but you might go, no, that's a waste of time, waste of money. Besides, there are other options than funerals. Your body can just be dealt with, and you have a memorial party or a memorial cricket game or a memorial golf day. Funerals and respect for mourning and memorials do not have to look like they did 20, 30, 100 years ago. So there's that. Second thing is, how would you like to be farewelled? Because this is the number one thing that I hear. We didn't know whether to bury or cremate her. We just had no idea. And that was a catalyst for so much angst. And then once she is cremated, what does she want done with the ashes or cremains? And that really creates a lot of angst for people. So that really big decision, A, do you even want a funeral, or do you want to be dealt with and your family can have a party or whatever else at a later date? And B, how do you want to be farewelled? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? If you want to be buried, where do you want to be buried? And why? And I ask all these questions in the book. But then there are also other methods these days. There's alkaline hydrolysis, which is a process that kind of breaks down all the building blocks of the body in a watery solution. So there's that. I think it'll be only a matter of time before we have human composting in Australia as well. So there are these emerging body disposition or body disposal methods coming. So if there's one thing you want to start with, just start thinking about that. Number one is, what do you want to happen to your body? And then that's the big, hard decision that will take a load off your family when the time comes.
And I think that's the important thing too. This is not a selfish thing. This is actually a way that you can allow your loved ones to not have to make those decisions and deal with the arguments, the heated conversations, the emotions. You're actually being very unselfish by putting this down for them, because it's taking a whole load. For those of us that have done it, it's taking a whole load of thought process out of it. They just now have a list of instructions and they go, well, that's what we're following. Don't argue about it. That's what we're following. And if mum or dad was here and they could hear us arguing about it, they'd probably whack us over the back of the head with a broom. So it's not a selfish thing to do. It's an important thing to do that actually makes the process for everybody left behind much more easy.
And there will be arguments. Usually there's one son or daughter that disagrees with the others, but at least if you can say, look, it's written down, it's here, this is what she wanted, at least there's a leg to stand on. So, and yeah, grief does weird things to usually
it does. People. Yeah. And it's not often even from a space of anything other than absolute sorrow. And people act so much out of character. And often things happen and things are said that are very difficult to claw back. And you just have to remember that it's the heat of the moment. And if there is all of this instruction set out by you, for you, it's one less thing people have to talk about, because then it just becomes a checklist.
Exactly right. Yes.
Yes.
Make it as easy as you possibly can. Yeah.
So such a fascinating conversation. And I'm definitely going to get a copy of that book, because I'm sitting here preaching this and I now have to do it for myself. So my 3 boys don't have to deal with that. And I'm going to buy one for their father as well.
And something else, Michelle, that's important is don't shut down other people's conversations. And this is something you can do. We've all been in the car with somebody, whether it's our friend or a family member, and a song comes on the radio. Oh, I love this song. When I die, make sure this is played at my funeral. A lot of people go, oh, that's morbid. Don't talk like that. And the conversation is shut. Even if you don't like it, just shut your mouth and say, okay, noted.
Noted.
Is there anything else you want? And then the discussion can open. So that's my number one tip. If someone else brings this up, go with the flow. Do not shut it down.
Because often that moment is a moment where they're not guarded. So it allows you to get so much more information around what is usually a very sensitive topic. Whereas if you just actually ask the question, often the person that's you're wanting that information from will shut down and be like, oh, what, you in a hurry for me to die? Or, what do you want to know that for? And then it ends up being this whole other conversation around what are you, are you in a hurry to get your hands on my money or whatever? So yeah, always go with the flow if you can have the presence of mind to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. This has been an amazing conversation. And I'm sure there's lots of people in their cars and listening to this who are going, oh, wow, okay, didn't think about that and didn't want to think about that, but this is such a sensible conversation to have. Lisa's book, The Bottom Drawer Book, is very easy to find. It's just thebottomdrawerbook.com.au. I will also put that into the show notes so that you can go back and find that later, and other information, Lisa's social links. If this conversation has moved something in you, please share this episode. The Bottom Drawer Book makes a fantastic gift. If you're wondering what to buy everybody for Christmas, go out and buy lots of copies, pop them in people's stockings for Christmas. You'll make Lisa very happy, and it'll open a conversation, probably in a funny way that is not a conversation that is easy, but it's definitely a conversation that matters.
And that's the one thing. There is humor in this. It isn't dark and spooky or morbid. It's brightly colorfully illustrated. And on my website are poems. So if you are gifting this, there are really funny, cool poems to break that ice that you can just slot into the cover. So yeah, I've made this as painless as possible and as friendly and colourful and humorous as possible.
Yeah, I'm just having that thought now around everybody pulling that book out of their Christmas stockings. And then by the time there's a little bit too much alcohol under everybody's belt, what those conversations might look like.
How
Everybody has to have
fantastic.
the presence of mind to hit the record button on your phone before that starts.
That's a great idea. And there's always one in the group who wants a Viking funeral. So yeah, it'll be a wonderful discussion to record.
Yeah, important conversations to have in this country about how you'll actually have that happen. Fantastic. Thank you so much for everybody who's listening. If you haven't already, please follow Soul Loom. Every follow helps me get these conversations out to people. It just takes a second. And until our next episode, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Lisa, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And keep weaving your own threads of becoming. Thanks, everyone.